In 1991, a group of amateur divers discovered an odd object, a submarine standing where none should have been. They discovered things that altered history and raised unsettling new concerns throughout the course of the following few years. You will be left stunned by what they discovered when they eventually entered the sinking Nazi German submarine. The mystery at the bottom of the ocean, the World War II ghost sub, is where the true narrative of U-869 begins. In the dark, choppy waters of the Atlantic during World War II, death may strike from below. German U-boats crept beneath the waves like sharks, sinking thousands of Allied ships with cold accuracy. Hitler's most dreadful maritime weapon was this submarine. They left a path of steel and oil and severed vital supply connections. Nazi Germany launched hundreds of U-boats during the conflict. Some were abducted, some simply vanished, and the most sank. Among these boats, U-869 was one of the most enigmatic. U-869 was a Type IXC/40 U-boat, one of the Kriegsmarine's longest and most potent long-range submarines. When it was launched in 1943, it had 6 torpedo tubes and was over 250 feet long. It was intended to traverse the Atlantic and strike enemy vessels in far-flung Allied-controlled waters. Its purpose is to ruin, demolish, and vanish. U-869 was commanded by a highly experienced Navy officer, Captain Helmut Nuremberg. In late 1944, U-869 was sent on its first combat trip as the war shifted against Germany. According to war archives, the objective was to reach the region surrounding Gibraltar, a crucial choke point where Allied ships had to pass across the Mediterranean. However, the German command structure was in disarray by that point. Misunderstandings, inconsistent directives, and a collapsing chain of command were all present. Some speculate that U-869's mission may have evolved over time. February 11, 1945, a U.S. near Gibraltar, a Coast Guard cutter, and a cruiser claimed to have engaged and sunk an unidentified German U-boat. According to the official report, it was a confirmed kill based on the time and the way the U-boat was believed to have traveled. The submarine that was sunk that day was determined by the Allies to be U-869. The story ended when the battered and disbanded Kriegsmarine said nothing contradicting what had been reported. When U-869 sank off the coast of Gibraltar, it was believed that all 56 of its passengers perished. No signs of life, no calls for assistance, and no witnesses. Because it was just another entry in the massive, deadly book of World War II, another enemy submarine that never returned home, people didn't doubt this account of events for decades. On closer inspection, however, the plot begins to unravel. First, there were no confirmed images or sonar readings of a wreck in the vicinity of Gibraltar that resembled the dimensions or form of U-869. Wartime reports were generally untrustworthy because they frequently relied on visual confirmation or educated estimates made under pressure. Because of the size of the Atlantic and the age of technology, mistakes were simple to make. Second, the final destination of U-869 was never made explicit in German records from that era. Germany's war machine was collapsing by 1945. Records went missing or were destroyed, radio talk was lost, and the logs that were retrieved were frequently difficult to interpret. Many now believe that U-869 may never have reached the Strait of Gibraltar. What was even more frightening was the radio silence. German U-boats had to report during operations to receive fresh orders and to learn how they were doing. Long after it was believed to have sunk, U-869 was last spotted or heard from while still in the North Atlantic. There was nothing else after that. Like the ocean had absorbed it all, there was silence. The more they investigated, the more questions researchers and scholars discovered. Was it the incorrect submarine in that battle off Gibraltar? Was there a much stranger going on? Or was it moved without people noticing? Before U-869 was finally solved, more than 40 years had passed. With various tales and recollections that were fading, it resembled a ghost ship lost in time. Families of the crew had neither a grave to visit nor wrecks to lament. They had nothing but a wartime file that didn't fully make sense and a name on a memorial. Even the experts couldn't agree. Military historians claimed the case was closed when discussing the Gibraltar attack. However, amateur investigators, dives, and wreck hunters weren't so certain. Something odd appeared on radar off the coast of New Jersey after decades. What's happening in Jersey? Steel is buried in the North Atlantic off the coast of New Jersey. Under the waters lie hundreds of wrecks. They sustained damage from wars, accidents, and storms. It serves as a mystery for local divers as well as a playground. However, wreck divers discovered something in the summer of 1991 that was completely unlike anything they had ever seen. John Chatterton, Richie Kohler, and a few of skilled Northeast divers were searching for wrecks that no one knew about using side-scan sonar. The sea off the coast was notoriously hazardous because to strong currents, little visibility, and deep dives. Technical dives, which are high-risk excursions requiring preparation, precision, and steely nerves, were not your typical dives. Their radar detected a picture of a long, thin, torpedo-shaped object on the ocean floor, 230 feet deep and about 60 miles off the coast of Point Pleasant, New Jersey. It appeared to be ancient and human-made. The curiosity became a passion. On their first dive, the cold seeped through their suits, and they could only see a few feet. The structure was twisted with fishing nets that had been there for decades and was partially covered in sand. However, it was obvious that this was a submarine. The large one wasn't supposed to be there. They initially saw no marks or numbers on the hull. There was no flag, no sign, no nameplate, nothing to identify the type of ship this was. The outer hull split, and the conning tower collapsed, severely damaging the structure. How it was gradually rusting away was a mystery. What nation are you from? Which grade? When the divers spotted it, they named it Ghost. This was the beginning of several return expeditions that involved careful planning, cautious decompression pauses, and various trimix gas mixtures. Risks were extremely high, including oxygen poisoning, nitrogen narcosis, and, worst of all, the bends. However, every dive provided them with fresh data. Inside the wreck, they discovered German instruments, pipes, valves, and gauges with metric unit markings. It was a German U-boat, of course, but which one? They discovered bowls, plates, and equipment, some bearing the Kriegsmarine eagle, but nothing that would identify the perpetrator. Their discovery of a tarnished but undamaged butter knife marked a turning moment. The word Horenberg, a man's name rather than a model number, was carved on it. Everything was different. The divers located a real individual with that name, crewman George Horenberg, who was called up to service on U-869 by consulting military records and crew rosters. Both undersea and in historical records, they continued to search. They discovered diesel engine components and valve manifolds with serial numbers on a subsequent dive that might be connected to documents from the German manufacturer of U-869. The parts fit together. These private divers discovered the enigmatic wreck despite all the odds. In 1997, 6 years after the initial plunge, the United States confirmed it. Navy, the U-869 was the actual submarine that was destroyed off the coast of New Jersey. U-869 had not sunk as close to Gibraltar as U, which had enormous implications. According to military records, 3,000 miles from its historical location, it had been dead off the U.S. East Coast since 1945. The divers had located and named the wreck, something no war record had ever done before. They were aware of the reality. At that moment, the unsettling realization struck. Aside from a few obsessive dives, U-869 would still be rusting away in silence, never sharing its story. History aficionados listened. It was one of the best identifications ever made underwater, according to wreck hunting experts from all over the world. Without assistance from organizations, the military, or the government, a team of amateur divers collaborated on the ocean floor for hundreds of perilous hours. However, the mystery remained unsolved. What brought U-869 here? The key question remained. Although it was instructed to travel to Gibraltar, wartime rumors placed it in Europe. What caused it to travel to the opposite side of the Atlantic? Was the route altered? Did it get fresh covert directives? Or did their poor communication cause it to go awry? Which documents remain to provide a response to that query? All of the personnel aboard U-869 perished along with the submarine, and the Kriegsmarine logs were incomplete. History appeared to be correct because a grave was discovered. However, the whole mystery of U-869 was only beginning to be solved. Friendly fire death, or something worse. A fresh enigma emerged once it was established beyond a reasonable doubt that the German U-boat U-869 was the wreck off the coast of Fresh Jersey. Why did it sink? Although all of the theories were grounded in fact, there were certain holes in them that gave the impression that the truth was just out of grasp. The two most popular explanations, which are still up for debate, are as follows. 1. The U-869 was sunk by its own weapon. German bombs were powerful during World War II, but they were not flawless. A terrifying malfunction known as the Circle Runner had the ability to send a torpedo hurtling in a broad arc and turning back toward the submarine that shot it. It occurred multiple times during the war, and all U-boat captains were aware of its perilous nature. According to some proponents of the Circle Runner theory, U-869 experienced the following. The torpedo, which may have been fired during combat or as a test, strayed off course and looped back, striking its own submarine. The fact that U-869 never attacked an enemy ship, no torpedo hits or attack reports, and that it suffered extensive internal damage associated with an explosion near the hull rather than from an external strike serve as evidence. 2. In combat, U sank U-869. Ships of the United States Navy. According to one theory, the USS Howard D. Crow and the USS Coinbase may have used hydrophones or sonar to locate a submarine on February 11, 1945, and then shot depth charges at it. This strike was held responsible for sinking an unidentified U-boat after the war, but it turned out to be U-869. The United States did this. Even after the wreck was discovered, the Navy maintained that its depth charges were the cause of the ship's demise, something they had predicted would occur for a long time. I disagree with both theories. At the time, U-869 was ordered to sail to Gibraltar and was not meant to be close to the East Coast. The U.S. ships hit a submarine in that region. Why wasn't it connected to U-869? The numbers provided do not precisely correspond to the location of the wreck. The torpedo tubes remain plugged, according to damage assessments and sonar surveys. Why didn't it fire if it had been fighting? The hull's exterior hasn't been as badly damaged as one might expect from a direct depth charge strike, but the interior compartments have been torn apart, suggesting that a shock wave is coming from within. The compartmentalized damage to the control and torpedo rooms points to a confined internal explosion, possibly caused by a torpedo exploding in or close to its tube. The military maintains conflicting records. U-869 was long believed to be far from the United States' coast, and it was unclear exactly which sub was destroyed by American warships. It's possible that Howard D. Crow and the other ships sank a U-boat, but not U-869. Perhaps U-869 had already been destroyed by a faulty bomb a few days earlier. Or perhaps both theories are incorrect. It's possible that U-869 was on a covert mission where shifted orders were never recorded because it was in an unusual location and wasn't communicating over the radio. It might also explain why its discovery was not made public. They couldn't figure out the answer until they had one more thought. The sealed compartment. In late 2024, divers utilized improved dive planning and modern equipment to reach a section of the submarine that had long been believed to be inaccessible. Because it had caved and been rusted shut by time and pressure, the sealed area had most likely not been disturbed since U-869 sank. Inside was a well-preserved time capsule, complete with intact lockers, storage crates, and footlockers, albeit some of the rubber seals were barely holding. Clothing, logbooks, and ration cans were among the items discovered. Then, they discovered something even stranger, a ceremonial dagger belonging to an officer that had an engraved motto from a specific naval regiment. An officer's dress uniform with the Iron Eagle emblem still on it, and a crimson armband with a swastika on it, better preserved than anyone could have imagined. Buried among sealed documents wrapped in oilcloth were an unopened swastika flag folded with military accuracy, English-language propaganda leaflets designed to infuriate Americans, and a partially encrypted codebook with markings from Nazi Germany's military intelligence agency, the Abwehr. The discovery was unexpected and so delicate that it was never released to the public. To put it another way, U-869 may have been doing more than simply observing the Atlantic. It might have been dispatched to the United States to provide supplies or agents. Soil. Our understanding of how the Germans operated in the Western Hemisphere would be altered even near the conclusion of the war if a Nazi submarine made a covert landing close to the American coast. However, the concept has yet to be validated. One of the 56 men assigned aboard U-869 was the missing man. When the submarine sank in early 1945, it was believed that they had all perished. However, the final list of casualties did not include Herbert Gassowski's name. Originally scheduled to sail on U-869, he became ill and had to be removed from the mission. He was replaced by another man. That one shift in focus influenced the rest of his life. For many years, it was believed that U-869 had been destroyed by Allied depth charges and had been lost close to Gibraltar. This was the official narrative. Then, off the coast of New Jersey, wrecked divers discovered U-869 in the 1990s and began contacting relatives. After much effort, they located Herbert in Germany. Herbert wasn't sure at first because this went against all he had believed for almost half a century. In the end, however, he accepted the evidence. He was shown images of the retrieved objects by the divers, including technical parts and even the knife with the name of Horenberg, whom Herbert had known. George Horenberg was definitely involved in U-869, he said. The identities of crew members and German side documents were verified in part by Herbert's recollections. Nobody was aware of the enclosed compartment because he passed away in 2005. Or perhaps he was aware of it and chose to remain silent. This article raises more questions than it does answers. Experts, those who assisted with the ship's discovery, and even the relatives of the U-869 crew are still troubled by these problems. Some aspects of this narrative remain a mystery despite advancements in technology and new evidence. Numerous possibilities were made possible by the discovery of U-869. Was it only a miscommunication in the midst of the fighting? When it unexpectedly appeared off the coast of the United States, could it have been on a far more covert mission? Was there something else going on that history hasn't discovered yet, or did the sub simply get lost? This account is frightening because it raises the possibility that U-869 wasn't just another war fatality. There are still some who believe it might have been a minor component of something much larger, such as a scheme to subtly alter history through secret missions or intelligence operations. The U-boat may have been a part of a wider scheme to enter the United States, perhaps as part of a spy ring or an intelligence-gathering mission that continued for decades without being discovered, according to Nazi propaganda pamphlets and an encrypted codebook discovered in the locked compartment. The mission and ultimate destruction of U-869 remain unclear, despite the fact that the wreck has been located and its historical significance has been somewhat elucidated. Every fresh piece of evidence discovered or recovered from the wreck adds to the mystery. Was it another ocean-bound shipwreck? Or was U-869 the final, last-ditch effort by Nazi Germany to win the war? Unlike many other lost warships, the story of U-869 has been recounted because of the divers' personal connection to the wreck and their unwavering quest for the truth. However, it's still intriguing to feel as though there are still unsolved mysteries regarding the submarine's role. Does the wreck include hints of a covert mission that could alter our understanding of how World War II ended, or was the enigma surrounding U-869 simply a horrific accident? More might still be discovered in the shadowy depths of the ocean as time and technology advance. Perhaps the narrative of U-869's secrets is far from over. With every additional piece of knowledge, we might be able to crack the long-standing enigma of what the ghost sub actually was. Even though the crew of U-869 never returned home, their narrative has ultimately been revealed, and their mystery still enthralls people who are interested in learning the most profound historical facts. It is evident that the events surrounding U-869 are far from ended. The submarine still contains many untold stories, even if it is motionless on the ocean below. These tales are waiting to be discovered in ways that are beyond our wildest expectations. What are your thoughts? Post your comments below